GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 is one of my favourite games of all time, featuring faithful level design, a well-paced storyline, well-balanced difficulty tiers, and a ridiculously fun multiplayer mode. GoldenEye quickly solidified its place in my gaming hall of fame. Developed by British developer Rare, GoldenEye was first proposed as a 2D side-scroller for the Super Nintendo, but GoldenEye director Martin Hollis suggested making it a 3D shooting game for Nintendo's new console in development, codenamed Ultra 64. Developers then considered making it an on-rail shooter similar to Virtua Cop, but ultimately decided it was better to afford Bond the freedom to explore each level. During a speech made in 2004, Martin Hollis of Rare revealed that GoldenEye was expected to be a failure upon launch, after receiving a poor reception at E3. First-person shooters were unheard of on console at the time, plus licensed games were notoriously poor quality. Add to that the fact that it was being released over 2 years after the movie, it should have been a recipe for disaster. Despite these apparent disadvantages, GoldenEye went on to become the third best-selling game on the Nintendo 64, with 8 million copies sold, after Mario Kart 64 and Super Mario 64, even outselling Ocarina of Time. So, with that in mind, here are my 10 facts about GoldenEye. Many of GoldenEye's levels were designed without any objectives set in mind. Only after the levels were created did the designers go back and try to decide the player's starting positions, enemy locations, and objectives. This is the reason many levels in the game seem to have rooms or areas without any obvious purpose. To quote Martin Hollis of Rare, the benefit of this sloppy, unplanned approach was that many of the levels in the game have a realistic and non-linear feel. There are rooms with no direct relevance to the level. There are multiple routes across the level. This is an anti-game design approach, frankly. It is inefficient because much of the level is unnecessary to the gameplay, but it contributes to a greater sense of freedom and also realism. And in turn, this sense of freedom and realism contributed enormously to the success of the game. The Japanese version does not contain the hunting knife weapon, which is available through the use of cheat codes in other versions. Instead, the Japanese version has a cheat code that gives Bond a paired rocket launcher and sniper rifle. When using the two weapons together, the sniper rifle's adjustable scope can be used. Unlike the 2x weapon cheats, each weapon can also be used separately. Mention GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 to anyone, and chances are that they'll immediately think of the game's iconic multiplayer mode. Few games on console at the time rivaled GoldenEye's frantic split-screen combat. Interestingly, the game's entire multiplayer mode was made in a month as a complete afterthought by programmer Steve Ellis. The bigwigs at Rare didn't even know they were developing a multiplayer mode until they were shown a complete working product. According to Ellis, since the game was already late by that time, if we hadn't done it that way, it probably never would have happened. The statue and cradle levels were once both playable multiplayer levels, but were taken out of the final game. These levels can be accessed and played with a Game Shark and contain weapons, ammo and body armour. Cradle had severe lag issues, especially with more than 2 players, and Statue also suffered from frame rate issues and contained several glitched areas that would not load properly. Most likely that these levels were removed from the final product for those reasons. The runway level was originally supposed to include a controllable motorbike similar to the scene in the film. However, it's nowhere to be found in the final version of the game, probably scrapped before the release due to issues with the mechanics of controlling such a vehicle in a first-person shooter. A model of the bike was ultimately placed on a desk in one of the huts on the surface level, but purely for decorative purposes. A life-size model of the bike does still exist in the game's memory and is accessible through cheat codes. GoldenEye's manual lists a Soviet weapon called the Spyder, despite the fact that no corresponding weapon exists in the final game. The name Spyder was actually dropped due to legal reasons, and the gun was renamed the Klob after Nintendo of America's Ken Lobb, who assisted in GoldenEye's development. The manual was either printed without the updated name, or it was printed before the name change occurred. Before being named the Spyder, the gun was also called the Scorpion, based on its real-life inspiration, the Scorpion VZ61. Besides the main characters in the film, the faces of the game's enemies and NPCs were modelled on those of the game's developers. David Doak was one such member of the development team. He was rendered into the game as Dr. Doak in the facility level. Enemies have a total of 30 different animations, depending upon how they're hit, for being blown up or shot. Timothy Dalton, Sean Connery and Roger Moore are all hidden in the game's code. They can be accessed via cheat codes, but only in the game's menus. They were cut from the final game due to legal reasons. At one point in GoldenEye's development, reloading your weapon was going to be triggered by removing and reinserting the N64 rumble pack. This was intended to mimic the action of removing and changing the magazine on the gun. A nice idea, but would have been pretty annoying after the novelty had worn off. So this is one feature that I'm glad didn't make it into the final game. GoldenEye contains references to the 16 Bond films made prior to GoldenEye. For example, the multiplayer characters Oddjob from Goldfinger, Mayday, played by Grace Jones in A View to a Kill, Jaws from The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, who also appears in the game's first bonus level Aztec, based on Moonraker, and Baron Samedi from Live and Let Die, who features in the second bonus level Egyptian. The 8 controller layout options are named after Bond girls, such as Honey, Goodnight and Galore. Also paying homage to previous films in the franchise are the multiplayer game settings You Only Live Once, The Living Daylights, The Man with the Golden Gun and License to Kill. In the Bunker 2 level, one of Bond's objectives is to collect a CCTV tape. Upon inspection in Bond's inventory, accessed via his watch, this tape can be seen to be a copy of the film GoldenEye. While the game was released 2 years after the film, the Rare team visited the film's sets during GoldenEye's early development period. The designers took pictures and were given blueprints to help them develop authentic looking levels, although often expanded beyond the originals. The final and, in my opinion, most interesting fact is in the game's code is hidden a working ZX Spectrum emulator. Rare developer Steve Ellis coded it simply to see if it was possible. The emulator includes several Rare titles from when they were called Ultimate Play the Game. So that's it for my 10 GoldenEye facts, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully there was 1 or 2 facts in there that you didn't know or found interesting. So I'll see you on the next one. Cheers!